Chapter 8. Surprises. Camp Half-Blood. When Thalia was sent back to her cabin by Perseus, she immediately went to bed, falling asleep before her head even hit the pillow. When she woke next morning, she was bombarded by questions from other campers about the quest, how she held the sky, and how she and Artemis managed to trap Atlas back underneath his punishment. She told campers that Artemis was the one who defeated Atlas, and she simply held the sky because she knew the prophecy said someone had to withstand the Titan's curse. Unfortunately, that brought up the unfortunate question about the last line of the prophecy, where one of the quest members was supposed to die by a parent's hand. Not knowing what to say, she just told them that she had no idea. She couldn't exactly tell them her patron had saved Zoe, who happened to be his girlfriend. He blasted the fates and then brought them all to the void for a meeting with the creator of the universe. Now could she? Thalia laughed to herself, thinking of how crazy that night was. Her life had always been crazy, but now things had multiplied 100-fold. She also began to worry about all the things Chaos had told them, the war with Gaia, the giants, and the other primordial gods. She wished she could talk to someone about it, but she was sworn to secrecy, so she couldn't mention it to her Luke, her best friend and the person she always confided in. She also wished she could talk to Zoe. On the quest they'd become very close, but unfortunately she was with the hunt, only gods know where. She figured she would talk to Perseus sometime soon. He said he was going to visit soon since they had much to talk about. She just didn't know when that would be. For days this continued, the constant questions from campers and them following her like sheep. They all wanted to know what it was like to battle a Titan. Thalia didn't understand why they were excited. It sucked. Sure, it sounds exciting, but trying to fight something as powerful as an Olympian is not something she would do by choice. But she put up with the questions, knowing the campers were just naive and curious. After escaping the campers and their constant questions, which had continued for the 5th day straight, Thalia snuck back into her cabin to avoid all the attention. People were pestering Luke too, but he seemed to enjoy the spotlight a lot more than her, and she was more than fine with that. When she walked through her cabin door, she jumped about 5 feet back with a very girlish yelp. Ah! Perseus was lying on her bed with his feet up on the bedpost. "Gods, don't do that to me, Perseus! You nearly gave me a stroke!" she shrieked. Perseus began to chuckle. "Sorry, Thalia, but I can't exactly stroll into the dining pavilion during breakfast and say we need to talk later. Couldn't you just do that mind speech thing you do with me?" Thalia asked, exasperated. "I could, but then I would miss learning how you scream like a 12-year-old girl when you get surprised," Perseus replied, laughing. In response, he received a death glare. Perseus put up his hands in surrender, still smiling. "Anyways, what brings you to the Zeus cabin in the middle of the afternoon?" Thalia asked. "Well, I told you I'd visit. We need to talk. Not here, though. Care to go for a walk?" Perseus replied. Where? We can't exactly go strolling around camp," Thalia said with an eyebrow raised. Perseus rolled his eyes. Hello? Primordial God here. The question is, where do you want to go?" "Anywhere." Thalia's eyes widened. "Anywhere? Other than here in Olympus? You name it," he replied with a smile. "How about Paris? I've always wanted to see the Eiffel Tower," Thalia said excitedly. "You got it," Perseus said as he snapped his fingers, creating a vortex. "Shall we?" he smirked, offering his arm. Thalia grinned and looped her arm through his. "We shall." When they stepped out, they were at the top of the Eiffel Tower. Thalia's jaw dropped. She hadn't expected to come out actually in the Eiffel Tower. After walking around for 10 minutes so Thalia could check everything out, they sat in a couple chairs Perseus conjured out of thin air. "So, what did you want to talk to me about?" "It's about what my father discussed with us. Things have changed in regards to plans for the Titan War. My father has decided the Olympians will have to fight Typhon themselves. Zoe and I will have other things we must do," Perseus said seriously. "Okay, but what does that have to do with me?" Thalia asked. "First off, Thalia, I need you to know I had no idea of this before today, and neither did my mother. I came straight to you once she figured it out and told me," Perseus said, knowing Thalia was going to be both excited and angry. Thalia was confused and worried. Perseus seemed very nervous about her reaction. "Okay, What is it? You know that after the fall of Greece, the gods moved to Rome and were worshipped there as well. Just with different names and slightly different personalities, Perseus said seriously. Thalia nodded, still unsure about where this was going. Thalia, you had a brother, right? Perseus said cautiously. Yeah, my mother gave him away when I was very young. She said he died sometime afterward, Thalia said sadly. That was a lie. Your brother is alive. He is a Roman demigod. There is a camp across the country where the children of Roman gods are raised, he told her. What? He's alive? Why haven't I seen him? Why did my mother give him away? Thalia screamed angrily with tears in her eyes. Thalia, Jason was born to Jupiter, not Zeus. Two siblings from the same mother but different aspects of a god are forbidden on Olympus. Your father was going to kill him. Hera took pity on him and instead offered to take him to my mother to raise him in Camp Jupiter, with Hera's Roman aspect Juno as his patron, Perseus explained carefully to her. Thalia was shaking in anger. She was also happy to know her brother was alive, but she wanted nothing more than to rip Zeus's head off. Perseus continued before she could say anything. Roman demigods are kept separate from Greek demigods because of their constant fighting. The gods have forbidden any contact between the two. My mother figured out he was your brother after meeting you and told me immediately so I could tell you. But you cannot tell anyone you know this, yet. I promise you I will reunite you with your brother as soon as I can. I can't see him? Thalia asked, with tears falling down her face. Perseus's heart broke seeing her so upset. He pulled her out of her chair and hugged her tightly. I am so sorry, Thalia. You can't see him yet. If you do, the gods will know, and the consequences would be too severe. But after the Titan War, your brother will be a part of the prophecy of 7. Greeks and Romans will learn of each other, and you will get to see him, I promise. Thalia nodded, her head still buried in Perseus's shoulder, crying. Eventually, Thalia regained her composure and returned to her seat. How's Jason doing in the Roman camp? She asked, wanting to learn more about her brother. Perseus smiled. Very well. He is my mother's favorite demigod. He's praetor of the camp. That's praetor of the camp, along with his girlfriend Rhena, a daughter of Bellona, who's a minor Roman goddess of war. Praetors are the leaders of the camp. No one holds more authority in camp than my mother. She's like the Chiron of the camp, just less helpful. Thalia raised an eyebrow. You have to understand, Romans and Greeks are very different. Romans are far more serious and strict. They're militaristic. My mother helps where she can, but Romans must make their own way through life, Perseus explained to her. Did you say girlfriend? He's a little young to be dating, Thalia said with a scowl. Perseus laughed. Yes, Thalia, he has a girlfriend. He's 15 years old. You're only a year older than him. You know just as well as everyone else demigods lead difficult lives. If they wait too long, they may never get a chance to be in love. Thalia narrowed her eyes but said nothing. After a moment of silence, a question popped into Thalia's head. Did you say Hera rescued my brother? From what I've heard, she despises all illegitimate children of Zeus. Why would she actually save one? It's funny how people always spin the blame towards someone else when something bad happens and it involves King of the Gods. Yes, she does hate them, usually, but she's not an evil goddess. She's the goddess of family, and she does not kill children of Zeus to other women. More often, she kills the women themselves, which is not exactly ideal, but thousands of years of infidelity and being treated like trash can turn a person a little sour. She saved your brother because it was not his fault his father is an ass. Zeus knew full well the law, considering he created it, and still decided to visit your mother in his Roman aspect, Perseus explained to her. Thalia was shocked to find out Hera was not as bad as people made her out to be. She could also understand where her bitterness came from. What about when Hera threw her own son Hephaestus off Olympus? Thalia asked when she remembered the story. Another lie. The Olympians know the truth, but Zeus did not want to seem cruel, so he made sure his wife got the blame in the history books. Your father cast him off of Olympus, saying he couldn't possibly have such an ugly son, Perseus told her with disgust. Thalia only had one thought in her mind, how much she hated her father. Thank you for telling me about my brother, Perseus, she told him sincerely. Thalia, I told you I will always have your best interests in mind. I wish I could bring you to him, but I can't. But you at least deserve to know. I told you you're like a daughter to me, and I meant it. I will not hide things from you. You mean too much to me, he replied just as sincerely. Oh, and call me Percy, not Perseus. My mother and Zoe call me Percy. You are family now, so I want you to do the same. Thalia grinned happily. Then her face morphed into a confused one. What does all this have to do with you and Zoe? Percy smiled. The Titans are sending an army with a few Titans to attack the Romans. Apparently the gods have been spending most of their time getting lucky in their Greek aspect because the Romans have a much smaller fighting force than the Greeks, too small to hold off the Titan army. So Zoe and I will be fighting with the Romans. Thalia's jaw dropped. But how? You can't exactly fight without people noticing a primordial god is on the battlefield. Perseus just smirked in response. I spoke to Artemis. When the war starts, she agreed to send a small group of hunters with Zoe to aid the Romans. The rest will aid the Greeks in defending Olympus. Okay, but you still didn't explain how you'll fight, Thalia asked, confused. Perseus' smirk just grew. He glowed a bright light, and Thalia looked away. When she turned back, her jaw dropped, and her eyes were the size of dinner plates. In his place was a girl about 15 years old, auburn hair with silver eyes and specks of black in them. You look like a Lady Artemis, she exclaimed. The girl chuckled. This is how I explained my plan to Artemis, and I told her I'd fight as a huntress. I told her I'd just say I'm a daughter of Artemis. Thalia started laughing. And how did she take that? The girl scowled and then glowed again. In her place was a girl with black hair and green eyes. She slapped me, actually, but I was only kidding about the daughter of Artemis part. I thought it was hilarious. Apparently she didn't agree. But she did like the plan and agreed to give Zoe command of a group of hunters. Thalia laughed more when he said he was slapped. It is funny, but probably not the best thing to joke about with her. The girl chuckled. I'll agree, but I will get her to loosen up one of these days. The girl glowed again. In her place, Perseus was back in his seat, smiling. So does this change anything for me in terms of the Titan War? Thalia asked. It does change the fact that you will have no help from the Olympians during the war, because they will be focused on the fight with Typhon. I'm sure minor gods will help with the defense of Olympus in order to keep Kronos from entering Olympus through any means other than the front door, forcing them to go up the elevator 5 to 10 monsters at a time, Perseus responded. But there's still much to be done before their war comes to New York, Thalia. Chiron sent a couple campers out to look for an ancient and dangerous place called the Labyrinth the day after you left for the quest to save Artemis. They found it, but out of the 3, only 1 returned, an Apollo camper named Will Solace. The other 2 were lost in the maze, Perseus explained. Wait, you mean like the Labyrinth, where Theseus killed the Minotaur? Wasn't that in Crete, like thousands of years ago? Thalia asked, confused. Yes, you are correct, Thalia, but just like the gods, the Labyrinth has moved with Western civilization. The Labyrinth is currently underneath the United States, with different entrances all over the country, Perseus said, impressed of Thalia's historical knowledge. Okay, that makes sense, but why does Chiron care about the Labyrinth enough to send campers to find it? Thalia questioned. Apparently, the Titan army has found the Labyrinth and wants to use it to transport his troops quickly. Chiron has yet to discover whether or not there's an entrance in camp. If there is, then it would be perfect for Titans to send an army to decimate the demigods before they march to New York. Without the demigods, Olympus is basically defenseless, with no one to stop Kronos from marching in and destroying it, came Perseus' reply. So what can we do to stop them? Asked Thalia. I know where the entrance to the Labyrinth is inside Camp Half-Blood. I'm going to have you find the entrance accidentally. Afterwards, a quest will be given in order to find Daedalus, the creator and mastermind of the Labyrinth. That is who the Titans are looking for. They need to find him so they can get Ariadne's string, the string Theseus used when he was first in the maze. With that, the army can march through without getting lost. The quest needs to find him first, Perseus explained. Wait, what? Daedalus is dead. He was alive thousands of years ago. What do you mean, find him? Thalia exclaimed. He is not dead. However, he is not an immortal. Daedalus is a son of Athena, probably the smartest child of Athena to ever live. He also has a dark past, one that got him disowned and cursed by his own mother. Yet, he's found a way to keep himself alive all these years. Your friend Annabeth is the brightest child of Athena since Daedalus. She will be the one to lead the quest. I want you and Luke there as well. She's still so young. She'll need you two to help her navigate the maze and find the workshop of Daedalus, where hopefully you can retrieve Ariadne's string before the Titans, Perseus explained carefully. Thalia sat in her chair, looking out over the view of Paris from their seats atop the Eiffel Tower, thinking about everything she'd just learned. Do you know when the quest will be given? Thalia questioned. Yes, because during Capture the Flag, tonight, you're going to stumble across the entrance to the labyrinth, which is hidden between the two biggest boulders at Zeus's fist. The quest shall be given the next day, Perseus explained to her. Thalia nodded her head, but asked, Perseus, how will we find Daedalus's workshop? We could become lost in the maze like the other two campers who did not return from the quest to find the labyrinth. On your quest to save Artemis, Zoe said the two of you met a mortal girl who could see through the mist. She will guide you through the maze. She lives in New York City atop the Hilton Hotel in the penthouse, came Perseus's reply. How will a mortal help us find Daedalus? It's too dangerous to bring a mortal into a place like the labyrinth, said Thalia. Do you know why it was that Ariadne was able to make her string so Theseus could find his way out of the labyrinth? It's because she was a clear-sighted mortal. Clear-sighted mortals can see through the mist better than demigods, and are not affected the same way by the power of the maze. Now it's time I bring you back to camp. People will begin to look for you if you're missing any longer. Just make sure you find the entrance tonight no matter what. You need to have the quest issued, and then convince that mortal girl to help you navigate the maze, Perseus said. Thalia nodded her head. Close your eyes, Thalia, Perseus told her. She did, and when she opened them a minute later, she was back inside the Zeus cabin. The hunters of Artemis. Zoe had been waiting all day for night to come. Perseus had told her he wanted to talk to her tonight. He had sounded serious, so she was slightly worried about what the conversation would be about. She was glad when she found out she and Perseus would not have to fight Typhon, although the prospect of fighting the Titans in order to defend the Roman camp was only slightly more appealing. Lady Artemis had given her permission to leave for the night, telling the other huntresses that Zoe was running an errand for her, and that she would return very late that night. She was looking forward to seeing Perseus. It had been a few days since he came to speak to her in Artemis, and she did not have a chance to be alone with him during his visit. As Zoe wandered around the hunter's camp, she was startled and jumped backward when something brushed up against her leg. She looked down to see a midnight black wolf with black and silver eyes apparently smirking at her reaction to being startled. When she glared at the wolf, its smirk vanished. The wolf made a motion with its head, indicating it wanted her to follow it. When they were 100 yards outside of the view of the hunter's camp, the wolf began to glow until in its place was the handsome face of the man she loved. Immediately she jumped into his arms, with her lips on his. Once they broke their kiss, Zoe got onto his back, her face buried into the crook of his neck. His arms came down and grabbed her legs, holding her up as they began to walk through the forest. Percy, what did you want to talk to me about? Zoe asked sweetly in his ear as he continued to carry her on his back. That is for me to know and for you to find out when we get there, he whispered back softly. Perseus snapped his fingers and a vortex appeared in front of them. He walked through with Zoe still on his back, legs wrapped around his waist and arms wrapped around his neck. When they came out of the vortex, they were met by a cold breeze and the smell of the ocean. Zoe looked down and saw they were on top of a glacier. Where are we? She asked, confused, as he walked toward a small hill of snow on top of the glacier. We are in the Bering Sea on top of a glacier. Now close your eyes until I tell you it's okay to open them, Perseus replied, smiling. Zoe nodded and closed her eyes. They walked for a few more minutes. Zoe could tell they went up and then down a hill. When Perseus came to a stop, he carefully pried her arms off his neck and lifted her off his back, setting her on her feet next to him. "All right, love. Now you can open your eyes," he whispered to her. When she opened her eyes, she gasped. She was looking at the aurora borealis from one of the closest points possible. She turned to see Perseus, smiling sweetly down at her. He grabbed her hand and made a very thick blanket appear underneath them. Perseus pulled Zoe onto his lap and wrapped her arms around her. "It's so beautiful, Percy. But why are we here?" Zoe asked while snuggling into his warm arms. "Zoe, how long have we been together?" Perseus asked her. Just over 1,500 years, I think. Ever since the day you saved me from Heracles," Zoe replied, slightly confused. "And how many dates have we been on?" Perseus asked with a smile. None, I guess," Zoe replied, surprised to realize they had never actually gone on a date. "Exactly. Now that at least Artemis knows that we're together, I figured it was time to take you on a proper date. In case you hadn't noticed, I'm kind of in love with you," he told her warmly. Zoe smiled and sighed, leaning her head onto his chest, whispering, "I love you too, Perseus." The couple lay together on the blanket for a couple more hours, just watching the beauty of the northern lights and enjoying their time together. Perseus broke the comfortable silence by asking, "Zoe, what are you going to do after the war with Gaia, assuming we're still alive?" "Actually, I've been meaning to talk to you about that. I think I'm ready to leave the hunt. I want us to be together without having to hide from others," she told him, a little nervous about whether that was what he wanted to. "You do know you would lose your immortality when you leave the hunt, right?" he asked her. "Yes, but to be able to be with you, even if it's not forever, it would be worth it," she told him. "But what if it was forever?" he asked nervously. "What do you mean? I would be mortal again as soon as I step down from the hunt," she said. "Not if you were my wife," he said quietly. Zoe's eyes widened and she detached herself from him so she could turn around to look in his eyes. "Zoe, No. When we defeat Gaia and the other primordial gods, will you marry me?" he asked her nervously as he pulled out a box and opened it. The ring inside was silver, with a large diamond in the middle and a few smaller diamonds circling it. Zoe's jaw dropped and her eyes began to tear up. She stared back up into his eyes for a minute before she tackled him in a hug, ending up with Perseus on his back and Zoe on top of him. She leaned down and gave him the softest and sweetest kiss they had ever shared. When they broke apart, she smiled a gorgeous smile at him and said, "Of course I'll marry you, Percy. I love you." Perseus smiled back and pulled her into his arms. After he slipped the ring on her finger, they laid back down, watching the northern lights, happier than they had ever been in their entire lives.